miners. SRC standardized allowance, luxury hotels in major cities, also to feel the impact of standardized DSI. And judiciary states officers get a fraction of 1.4% of the total increment. That is win some, lose some as far as salaries is concerned. And rival promise to put country first as talks begin. That is also what we mentioned. The 10 is the number of leaders who will deliberate on issues affecting Kenyans. And we can see Azimio team leader Kalonzo Musyoka, Kenya Kwanza team leader Kimani Ichung'wah, and TRT MP William Kamket after the first joint meeting at the Bomas of Kenya yesterday. That is all tucked away inside the Standard this morning. On the sidebar, why President made long tour to restless Mount Kenya. A year after the Hustler movement won elections with only few promises fulfilled, Ruto took time to explain to a region with high expectation not to lose hope. The story tucked away on page 3 of the Standard this morning. I had to tell Mandago a few home truths. There is Mercy Tarus, who explains and says pain over shattered dreams pushed her to rail at our Singishu leader in botched varsity fund that you've been following, and you know the story as well. But if you're not aware of what the story is, that story is well laid out for you on page 8 of the Standard this morning. Every Thursday you have real estate Pullard magazine coming your way, changing Mombasa skyline, reshapes coastal city. Read all about it inside the Standard today. Looking at the teaser on top, shock for students after universities ignore fees directive is the story that you want to follow on page 6 of the Standard. An end of an era as Joseph quits Safaricom after 23 years. You can find all that story on page 27 of the Standard today. Lenana Bungoma bag quarters slot in school games. The story continues on page 39 of the Standard today. This is how it looks today. Make sure you grab a copy for yourself. Let's move on and see what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation. The big salary review is a splash. Windfall. SRC says review seeks to harmonize salaries across the public service. Teachers, police officers. Oops, jumped to the next page. Let me just go back there so that we can follow along together. That's page 2. That is page 1 of the front page of the Daily Nation today. Teachers, police officers, and the disciplined forces at large, as well as workers in county governments, are the biggest beneficiaries in the latest salary review after their take-home pay was raised by higher rates than other public servants. You have the story on page 7 of the Daily Nation today. Also, it has been broken down for you to just see how it's been distributed. The budget distribution for salary review for state and public officers in shillings. We have 44.2% teaching service. We have 20.9% security forces. We have 18.8% county governments. We have 3.4% other public officers. 1.9% county state officers. 1.4% judiciary state officers. And 0.6% executive state officers. 0.4% parliament state officers. That is how it has been doled out. And the rest of the story is tucked away inside the Daily Nation. Ruto Raila talks off to a cordial start. Crisis talks between President William Ruto and opposition leader Raila Odinga began on a cordial and conciliatory note yesterday as their representatives agreed to form a technical team to iron out their differences on the agenda for the negotiations. Yesterday's talks were led by Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party and National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah for the Kenya Kwanza Alliance. The story continues on page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. And also you have the property Pullard magazine that comes your way every Thursday as well. Where will the children play? While we are having all the concrete jungle as well, and it's consuming the spaces for children to play, and we know play is work for children. That is the Daily Nation this morning. Let's see what the star is holding for us. Civil servants get pay rise as allowances cut in a classical strategy of giving with one hand and taking with the other. Civil servants hit with brutal allowance abolition. You have the story on page 4 and 5 of the Star today. Has your MP ever spoken in Parliament? There is a probing question there. And it says a record 15 MPs did not speak at all. 1 year since they were elected to the 13th Parliament, scorecard reports compiled by Mzalendo Trust shows Mzalendo Trust is a parliamentary monitoring organization started in 2005 and whose mission is to promote open, inclusive and accountable parliaments in Kenya and Africa. The lobby assesses MPs' contributions, especially on the floor of parliament. And here is a scorecard. You can see how your parliamentarian fared there. These are the least active members, led by George Aladwa, very vocal on the streets, but in-house, very mealy-mouthed. We have Samuel Arama. You saw him toting his also again during the demonstrations, trying also to protect his property. Was vocal then on the streets, but now when it comes in the house, is also mealy-mouthed. Oscar Sudi always gives both sides declarations that are in the house as well. Is mealy-mouthed. We have Ernest Ogesi of Vihiga. Also, his mouth is shut in house. Fred Kapondi. We'll ask even who is that? That is from Mount Elgon. You can follow the story. List active women MPs. We have Teresia Wanjiru Mwangi, who's nominated. Elizabeth Kailemia, maybe you've never even seen her face. Mudoni Marubu, even her, I bet if you know her, she's not spoken on the floor of the House. List active youth members, youth that are MPs. We have Jafet Nyakundi from Kitutu Chache North, Zahia Handa, Nyaribari Chache, Teresia Wanjiru Mwangi nominated. Also most active members, Makali Mulu from Kitui Central, Vitus Elachi, Dagoretti North, James Nikal, that is from Seme. We have Ken Chonga, Kilifi South, and Geoffrey Ruku, Mbere North. Most active women MPs, Beatrice Elachi, Dagoretti North, Sarah Korere, Laikipe North, Beatrice Kemei, Kericho, Lilian Gogo, Rangwe, and Phyllis Barto Moiben. Most active youth MPs, Gitonga Mukunji, Manyata Irene Mayaka nominated. We have Joses Lel Mengit from Ngwen and Robert Ngui Basil from Yata, and also Joshua Kimilu from Kaiti. That story tucked away on page 8 of the Star this morning. Ruto meeting Mau Mau veterans at Sagana there. We can see Field Marshal Mudoni wa Kirima and President William Ruto at Sagana State Lodge in Nyeri County yesterday. These are the independence heroes. You can follow their story on or inside the Star this morning. Let's see. On top here we have Kenya Kwanza Azimio talks to begin in earnest on Monday. So yesterday were just preliminaries. The actual talks checks into place on Monday. This story continues on page 6 of the Star. Let's see what the People Daily is holding for us. This is what we're waking up to. Public workers get higher pay is the splash this morning. Salaries reviewed. Teachers among biggest beneficiaries as SRC announces new remuneration structure. President and deputy left out. Pressure to rise for private sector employers. And you have the story on page 4 and 5 of the People Daily. And by the way, this raises 1.7 trillion shillings on the wage bill. Just taking account of these salaries that have been raised, that is almost edging on half of what we normally have as the budget estimates. Standing at 3.5%, we have almost 1.7 trillion shillings that will be going to pay these public workers. Also talks team in fresh start to set agenda Monday. That is on page 2 of the People Daily. Now there is this MCA who is worth 200 million shillings. And the questions mulling over, or yes, hovering over his head regarding where he got this eye-popping figure. We know what the MCA is earned, and this is what the story is all about on page 6 of the People Daily. 200 million shillings is the question mark on his head. All right, how different agencies will share out new salaries, cash. Also, don't need to belabor the point. We have visuals here on the front page of the People Daily. You can consume all that information at your convenient time. But this is how it has been doled out in different sectors of the public sector. And SRC Chair Lynn Mengich says, quote unquote, public service production or productivity is a transformative agenda that will enable government drive and align the entire public service towards economic growth, higher and sustained revenue growth, which will reduce the wage bill to revenue ratio, improve service delivery, competitiveness, and employment creation. You have the story inside the People Daily this morning. Taifa Leo is up next. Kuna nuru gizani, dalili za awali za kumalizika kwa uhasama wenye maafa baina ya Kenya Kwanza na Azimio la Umoja zaonekana. Kuna nuru gizani. And I know also Ndoreti Muridhi will love to chime in on this as well. It's not kuna nduru gizani. Kuna nuru gizani. So we're happy it is not nduru, it is nuru. Maridhiano says pande mbili zatangaza kuwa zitafanya kila juhudi kufaulisha maafikiano na umoja wa kitaifa. That story continues on page 2 of Taifa Leo, and we can see the unflappable smiles of the two gentlemen there, where we have Kalonzo Musyoka leading the talks from the Azimio side, and the majority leader there, Kimani Ichung'wah, from the Kenya Kwanza side. Kalonzo had to say this. He says, tumekuwa na kikao chenye uchangamfu mwingi. Kimekuwa kikao chenye uaminifu. Kuna masuala yatakayohitaji mashauriano. Wanakamati hawa, you can read the rest of the details there. My Swahili is not really doing me justice this morning, so let me not massacre it. That is Taifa Leo. Let's buckle down to some business a bit and see how the shilling is faring. And it is wiping out 13 billion shillings payout to foreign investors. This is how it is performing. Shilling has lost 20% of value in the year to date. And also traders now buying US dollar at 148 on average. That story continues inside the Business Daily on page 2. And why I left Safaricom after 23 years, Michael Joseph call it quits right now. Recent exits from Safaricom's board. We have Michael Joseph, Linda Watiri, Bitangendemo, who got, of course, a new assignment in Brussels or in Belgium. And we have Sitholizwe Ndalose, Stanley Kamau, John Gumi, Christopher Kirigwa. And finally also Michael Joseph has called it quits after 23 years. You can read the rest of the details there inside the Business Daily. Central Bank holds benchmark lending rates on inflation ease. We had a meeting of the MPC. The Central Bank of Kenya has left its benchmark lending rate unchanged at 10.5%, with inflation having retreated last month. And the banks have been raising questions or also special umbrage on this as well. We shall be discussing that. And State lays case for release of 17 billion shillings edible oil cargo. This has been a controversial state of events, I should say. The government yesterday asked the High Court to lift an order blocking importation of 125,000 tons of edible oil, claiming that the freeze will occasion a loss of 17 billion shillings, which has already been paid to suppliers. Remember the controversial imports. We have the Law Society of Kenya, which moved to stop this particular importation, and the matter is still alive in court, and this is what the government is seeking to lift. Britam Airtel partner for mobile-based insurance solutions. Insurance firm Britam has partnered with Airtel and digital insurer Inclusivity Solutions to introduce mobile-enabled solutions targeting low-income families and micro, small, and medium enterprises. You can follow the story on the Business Daily today on page 14. And also, Africa is at risk of widening the inequality gap between it and the rest of the world if it fails to adapt to the 4 IR demands. You can read all about that inside the Business Daily, an opinion there by the Tangin Demo. Crossing borders, this is how the Daily Monitor is faring this morning. World Bank locks roads, schools, money. We can do without loans, Museveni says. And you know what? This is a blowback of the anti-gay act that Museveni assented to. And now World Bank is actually freezing all the funds in Uganda because of that. And Museveni says, tell you what, we can do without your loans. This is what you want to read in the Daily Monitor if you're waking up in Uganda this morning. And you can see also how the money is there from the World Bank Fund project in Uganda has been doled out. All this is bound to be affected, and because they are not really rowing back on the stand as far as the LGBTQ plus agenda that is being fronted by the West is concerned. Read all about it inside the Daily Monitor. Also, you have DM today talking about relationships, how your attitude can destroy a relationship. A teacher in hot soup after one dies in accident. That is in the Daily Monitor. If you're waking up in Uganda, grab a copy for yourself. Let's sort of head over to Tanzania. While fuel marketers require $747 million amid a shortage of US dollars, oil marketing companies in the country say they require a total of 747 million shillings to clear outstanding payments for petroleum products imported between March and July this year. The story continues on page 2 of The Citizen this morning. You can grab a copy of The Citizen. And EAC is set to act over frequent Lake Victoria maritime disasters. That is a story also on page 2 of The Citizen. Employers' key role in fight against HIV and AIDS. That also tucked away inside The Citizen. That's how it is looking. Africa now eyes visa-free travel and memorial parks. All that inside The Citizen in Tanzania. In Rwanda, the country is reviewing 27-year-old privatization law. What's new? That's the abiding question. The law gives government powers to repossess a company in case of mismanagement. You have the story on page 3 of the New Times. And Rwanda and Jordan sign visa-free deal. And you can see Ministry of Foreign Affairs and expatriates there. This is Vincent Biruta, and Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and expatriates of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. That is Ayman Safadi, signing 3 agreements, including a visa waiver for holders of ordinary passports on August the 9th in Amman. Biruta, who was on official visit to Jordan, announced that Rwanda would establish diplomatic presence in Amman. That's tucked away inside the New Times. And vulnerable households eligible for Muteule Desante's support. It has dropped now by 74%. Increase in Rwanda's land population attributed to bold conservation efforts. Remember, today is World Lions Day. And you can read all about that on page 3. World Lions Day is being observed today. And of course, also there is an opinion piece there. You can follow it on page 6, where World Lions Day celebrates Rwanda's roaring success. The East Africa this week, Kenya, Uganda, 6 billion shillings to put SGR on track. The two partners have abandoned the original sponsors, China, and are taking to European and Gulf lenders, targeting to take the line all the way to DRC, Rwanda, and Juba. This story continues on page 4 and 5 of the East Africa this week, and why AU wants its own credit rating agency. It says the big 3, that is Fitch, Moody's, and S&P, are unfair in downgrading countries. And this story continues on page 6 of the East Africa this week. Grave fears for missing women. Girls in Sudan, fighters have been kidnapping women and enslaving them and even killing some. That is a story that is on page 24 of the East African this week. Time magazine, artificial intelligence by the people for the people, is what is headlining the front page of the Time magazine. The Economist is looking at the overstretched CEO, and it's truly overstretched, as you can see depicted there. This is the latest copy of The Economist. Larry Fink demonized the greatest bank heist ever, pulling Israel back from the brink, how to sink a Russian battleship is a story that you want to follow inside the latest copy of The Economist and also the Newsweek. Jesus takes holy word. It's the splash. Sound of Freedom is the latest mega hit in a surge of faith-based movies and TV shows. That is the latest copy of the New Times. And Moscow's crumbling propaganda machine. And also, if you are investing internationally, you want to grab a copy of the shares, which is analyzing a stock in 5 easy steps. This week is all about Microsoft, and they make your investment easier. You can grab a copy of that as well. And lastly, we can also look at Kiplinger. This is all about personal finance. Cash in on AI. Use our stocks and fund picks to benefit from the boom in the artificial intelligence. This is on page 18. Insurance checkup. Are you auto and home policies up? Are auto and home policies up to date? And the rest of the details, of course, tucked away inside the Kiplinger personal finance. Our editorial cartoonist, this is where we want to begin our discussion as well with our panelists as I introduce them. And it's been 1 year down the line. 9th of August was yesterday. And you can see from that particular editorial cartoon that is inside the Standard, Mr. Nderitu, someone was in the voting booth. That it was Wanjiku. And you can see he was ticking and he's voting the ballot there. And the cost of living was actually hanging on the rafter of her mind. But today, we're still grappling on the cost of living and pointing accusatory fingers towards each other. Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. And the person who's caught in between there is Wanjiku. That is what Gams has drawn for us inside the Standard today. Well, in the Daily Nation, Bomber stocks, no hardline positions beyond this point. And of course, you have to pass through that particular security. They want to check if you're holding hardline talks and stands. And so beyond this point, no hardline stance that is expected. Everyone is being checked coming into this particular talks. Right? We have Junior Mwala, Kalonzo Musyoka with his wipers there. Yeah, and I don't know who is actually now coming in. And there we have also Omar Hassan, the gentleman that is being, oh, that is, well, I have no sorting idea. Maybe you can tell us whose face is that. That is the Daily Nation today, Bomber stocks. We have in the Star, Ozona has drawn this and is arm wrestling there. And we can see the puppeteers. That is the hand in glove is Kalonzo Musyoka. And, or a glove in hand, I should say. And we have also Kimani Ichung'wah on the other side. And he says, I've got to hand you. I've got to hand you. It wasn't easy getting here. And also lastly, in the People Daily, heavy taxes. That is the biggest Caesar that we've ever seen. The long neck of Wanjiku is being cut. Why don't you reduce the size of a Caesar? That is what Wanjiku is asking. Let's begin from there briefly, getting introductory remarks from our panelists today. Patrick Obath, Apadali today. I know you've skimmed through the pages today, so you have a rich stream of information as far as today's conversation is concerned. I'm glad that you're joining us. Also, Bunyasi Sekwa as well, and freshly from prayers as well is Bill Okero. Thank you for joining us, and also Nderitu Muredi. Let's just begin from there with yesterday's talks before we head to the packs that we can see that is bound to affect this country, 1.7 trillion shillings as far as wage bill is concerned, especially for the public servant. Patrick, let's hear from you first. Looking at the editorial cartoons, we can begin with the cost of living. That is the major agenda as far as the talks are concerned. But yeah, I don't think they've allowed cost of living to be the main agenda.
And the cost of living during elections is a good thing to have on your agenda. Mm-hmm. It appeals to almost everybody in the country. So when you talk about cost of living, you're talking about things that affect people at all levels in the country. Mm-hmm. But the reality in the world these days, over the last 10 to 15 years, the whole global economy is so interconnected, mm-hmm. especially with China coming up, India, places like that, that making a promise in a country that the production rate is not very high right? And you're still dependent on the global economy to sort of supply a lot of things into your country. I think it's a very risky situation to say the least. And I mean, if you remember the pronouncements post-election around the cost of hunger coming down and the cost of fuel coming down, etc., etc., and then eventually the removal of all the subsidies and everything going up the other way. I think the reality of managing the cost of living in a country is not an easy thing with this interconnectivity with the global players as it stands. And you can see, I mean, the cost of fuel. Saudi Arabia has, the OPEC has basically cut down production in order to sort of show up the prices. Yeah. Whereas because of the sanctions put on Russia, their oil was cheaper than everybody else in the world. Yeah. So these global things will hit us, and we've seen the cost of fuel in this country has not come down as much as people expected. Cost of food has not come down. Ukraine's, Russia, still. And we're expecting this bump. Was it this month when the bumper harvest is supposed to happen?
Yes, beginning August, going down
August,
to...
going down to wherever it is. Yeah, and it will be interesting to see whether the cost of hunger will actually go down in that period of time. It may be a very short-lived thing, because the cycle of availability of maize in this country is such that, yes, when the harvest happens, it's a little bit more available. But a lot of the large producers do not put their product on the market at this price because they know that come December, thereabouts, whatever, the price is going to go up. Yeah, because of there's a structural shortage of maize in the country. Yeah, so this whole issue of predicting that the price of food will go down, yes, it will dip down, but the long-term price is not going to go down that significantly.
So it's just going to be a blip, because this is a fleeting cloud.
Yeah,
we cannot really stock our hopes on the prices really going down because of a bumper harvest. What really happens afterwards when we've consumed all that particular harvest? Let's just hear from. But the issue of when you talk about the cost of living and the fuel prices, we have EPRA, which has been summoned to the courts as well regarding their move not to really, align with the directives from the courts. They went full steam ahead and maintained the particular price or the VAT at 16%.
Yeah.
So do you think there will be any discernible difference that it will make them appearing in court, knowing that also this law, it's being applied retrospectively?
I think the price will not change. This is just somebody getting a rap on the hand for not behaving at the time and going ahead and and increasing the price. Yeah, so it's a rap on the hand rather than the price going to change. I don't think because the law, the freeze on the act has been lifted, so they can continue. But it's just being told you jumped the gun and went and put the prices up before before this thing, when this thing was in court and the ruling had been made. But he may have done it just before the ruling was made. So it's a question of of the interpretation of the timing.
Thank you.
And just give the guy a big rap on the hand and tell him you misbehaved, and he might fine you, might lock you up for a day or something like that, and then you go back to work.
Right. Director Murray, I expected to actually be seeing you passing through this particular entry into the Bomas of Kenya's talks as well, and being frisked to see if you've got any headline stands as well, as everybody's being frisked looking at that editorial cartoon. So you can tell us the latest development as the chief advisor, economic advisor of Azimio's side as well. I don't know how you actually came up with the final team, but you can actually also just give us a hint.
Well, thanks, and good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
So, I mean, Patrick is right. Cost of living is a primary issue. And by the way, it's not just a Kenyan issue. I think this is what we all need to accept. Cost of living is bothering most countries in the world. But how governments what governments do in order to manage the cost of living and keep the escalation down, that's where the difference is. And I think in terms of prowess of management of public affairs, that's where you see the difference. Because you will see small economies, like Seychelles, for example, where inflation is around 4%. And it is a much smaller economy, dependent on tourism. You will see Eritrea and Djibouti, just our neighbors up north here.
Yes.
Again, inflation quite low, and these are much smaller economies. But of course, you'll also see some countries, Ghana, where they are also struggling, perhaps at the same level as Kenya. You'll see some countries like Zimbabwe, where, of course, inflation has been a major problem for a long time. So it's about the choices that government makes as it is managing the economy. Now, a couple of months ago, there was on social media a video by, Ghanaian vice president explaining that, look, you can do all the propaganda you want, but ultimately, the exchange rate will betray you, because you can't intimidate the exchange rate to move the way you want. The exchange rate is driven by the fundamentals. What are you importing? What are you exporting? And you can see what is happening with our own shilling now at around 150 shillings to the dollar.
And it's bound to be rising.
And it's, certain economists, including myself, believe that we will probably 170 is in sight. 170. And of course, we can now go into the debate, was it overvalued to begin with or not? But the point is, the shilling continues to lose ground. And with it, now you go back to the point Patrick made. Remember, we import food. We import rice, we import sugar, we import maize, we import wheat. A lot of these crops, like maize and wheat particularly, we import from Ukraine, from Russia, and so on. But because we import so much food, as the shilling becomes weaker, then the Kenya shilling, or the local cost of it, of the import, goes by the same margin. So although, of course, we've been focusing on VAT and the doubling of VAT, probably the depreciation of the shilling is doing way more damage in terms of increasing the ultimate cost of food and cost of fuel in the country. Again, as he said, of course, all our oil is imported, and petroleum products are in everything because of transportation, and therefore, when the prices of petroleum go up, what you see is that the cost of everything else in the economy goes up.
It's bound to float up.
So what my own expectation, and certainly my advice to the, my technical advice to the committees negotiating, is that first of all, and I agree with the cartoon, you have to leave your whatever preconceived notion at the door, and let us sit down and look at this thing. Requires a very delicate mix of policy. It requires actually some really tough decisions on the part of government. And one hopes that the leadership on the government side is going to take those tough decisions. Otherwise, we as Mudavadi said some months ago, we are in for 3, 4, 5 years of a very hard time.
And talking of Mudavadi, we have many people faulting the AG of misadvising Mudavadi on his role with the PSC as well. We shall be looking at that as well much later. But let's hear from Bunyasi Sakwa, especially with the talks. What is happening across also in Uganda when we look at the anti-gay act that was passed by the president? We have now World Bank saying they're not doling out their loans to Uganda. That is what we have on the front page of the Daily Monitor in Uganda this morning.
Thanks a lot, Debal. I want to start with the Uganda case. My colleagues have covered the other issues broadly. I hope that people wake up to the reality of the world, as it were. When Bobby Wine was struggling the last election, maybe 2, and deaths and so on, I think Americans might have said something low-key out there. World Bank may have been largely quiet because it's not in their domain to be commenting deeply in those. But on LGBTQR, whatever the number,
LGBTQI plus.
I plus, and so on.
Have you ever known why the plus is there?
I don't know. I think others are undefinable, but I don't know what it is. Maybe somebody around the table might tell me what it is. But that plus is all
Bilo will tell us what the plus is all about.
Yes. I think it gives us a sense of the world reality, that the powers that have might can intervene in any point that they like. First it was human rights, and so on. Now they push it to a point where whatever the population of LGBTQI is in Uganda or in the region, to say that for an institution that lends, is not donated, that lends resources donated by many countries around the world. Of course, granted, the U.S. Takes a predominant position by virtue of its might. There was a time when Saudi Arabia would have been the larger contributor in both IMF and World Bank. They wouldn't let them do that. Or they said you can give some of the money as a special fund on the side, but you can't buy your shares and get control. You can see the amount of control that comes from the external areas. So I want to tie up that with the talks that we're having going on. First of all, it's a great idea that is, people are sitting down. From the perspective particularly of the cost of living, as a mirror to how the economies are managed, including ours and so on. You can see the kind of how global initiatives can completely disrupt domestic initiatives, like the LGBT thing we're talking about. Something that the whole region is probably united in saying it's really not a priority. Let people, I would say, let people live their private lives in the darkness as they wish to do, because we don't know truly what happens. But the same thing then happens. The difficulties we get on the cost of living that originate from outside depend on the decisions made by the U.S. for domestic reasons. Not even yet for dominance of the world, for domestic reasons. And depending on what policies they have on the table, including raising interest rates the way they did, which was it's a sort of vortex. It sort of pulls in what's happening now, what pulls in dollars from around the world. Sometimes it's a strategy to fend off China in one way or another if they can. But we take it as we receive it as given on the market. I think it's just, I know that our economic managers are alert, but I think our citizens should get even more alert on those trends as they can. And secondly, on the same issue, the debate that we have, US and China, our orientation globally, I think should now begin to inform us that we can't be naive and say we have had a history with English-speaking countries, we've had a history with Britain as we used to have. Now we have it with America, so we must go there and so on. I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying it should be evaluated in the context of our changing interests. Now we go into these talks. I'm glad that a low cost of living is on the table. Is not the major thing. The reason being, it's not entirely within the control of our hands. You'll make some gains, as Mr. Nderetu has outlined and Mr. Bath have outlined. You have some room to play and make some improvements. Tactical, it's at the tactical stage. But the strategic things are determined at levels that we do not actually are active in. What I think for me, what have been right, center, and whatever it is on these talks between the two sides is electoral processes and electoral justice. Those are the ones that light the fire every 5 years. And on that, my position is we have not, as a nation, despite the fact that we have good institutions, you may like or not like how they have decided, but we certainly are not used to the idea of losing. And I don't believe that you can go to an election, fight as hard as they do, spend as much as they do, and when it comes out that one is like Omanyala, even if you are just a notch ahead, but you are the winner, that now you should, yes, for microseconds, in fact, that you should now step back and say, oh, but I had my friend also here, so my win is a win, but he is also a win of some kind. But I think those compensatory considerations do occur already, but they're not fully appreciated. They occur already in the sense that you have a parliament that is for both sides. Everybody sits in parliament and is paid whatever. We have a budget-making process that has a lot of authority vested in parliament, but in fact, parliament doesn't play that role fully. The institutions provide these opportunities. I think we should think in terms of how we reform those institutions.
Right, thank you.
There's a lot more to say, but thanks for that.
Right. Bilo, Waswahili wanasema ukiona mwenzako anyolewa, tia maji kichwani. You can see in Uganda wananyolewa as far as the funding is concerned, because and we have our own bill as well, being steamrolled by Peter Kaluma, the member of Parliament.
It's the media.
It's the media
that gives these people a lot of traction. This is evil. If our media was serious about issues that concern and don't waste giving headlines to these criminal activities of and what they are doing is cultural imperialism.
Yeah.
If you had doubted
these
that,
are culture wars,
yes. If you ever doubted that that IMF and World Bank are tools of Western countries, now you see it the way they are behaving, because everyone is a member of IMF and World Bank, and everyone is a contributor. And each person at the UN level, everyone has an equal right as a nation. But you can see, I mean, when it is their interest, they want to, propagate their that cultural, imperialism of the West. They want to use it. But I think, again, I always think the reason why these things happen is because we are poor. They can't do this to other countries in the Gulf which have money, where it's outlawed. You'll be shot on sight. You mentioned those things. You'll be shot on sight, but they can't dare do those things. You saw it even with the World Cup in Qatar, told them to get lost.
Yeah.
I mean, but now here you are a basket case. They know you you need money, and so you're told, okay, my friend, do what you want. But I'm happy with what Ugandans have been doing so far. But I think so. It's not. I think they should stand firm. Uganda should not allow to be dictatorial, and they'll find resources to manage their country. There are many countries that are not getting aid from the West, and they have survived. There are countries that have had sanctions for the last 30, 40 years, and they've survived. But on these talks, me, I'm very happy actually the way the talks have started. They're very positive. I thought the way they have been talking the whole week, that when people get there, you'll need police to
get them to sit.
To get them to sit. But as usual, Kenyans, when it comes to the crunch, we always think hard, and then we, there's a bit of rationality, there's a bit of sense. And so if it continues this way, I like the way Chungwa, whom I thought was going to be very rough, coming from Kenya Kwanza, the government side. But this
is still warm-up.
It's warm-up, but if the warm-up...
You're still gauging your opponents.
It's changed radically.
It appears Dibal had wanted
No, this is still warm-up.
It's not about the warm-up. It's the way even they say it. I mean, he said we cannot afford to fail in this meeting. And that they are going to discuss everything. So let's see what happens Monday when they start going down to the agendas. But I think it's a positive thing, the way they started off. Let's hope that it continues that way, and it will. This grand understanding in government has always been there when it comes to talks, but it's important that the issue of the cost of living becomes one of the items. If you want Kenyans to be on board that discussion, if you remove that, then it is just something for the leaders to.
It's a political meeting.
It's a political meeting. It has nothing to do with the rest of Kenyans. And I hope we're going to discuss this, which I think is a strange statement that has been made.
Yes, of course.
I didn't see that.
Have a look at the back of it. At the back of the nation. May I comment?
No. We want to take a short break so that when we come back, you wanted to comment on...
just very, very briefly, if I may. You see, and perhaps we'll go deeper into it, the cost of living is a real issue. And I really would hope to persuade all of us, particularly the government side, to take the question of cost of living seriously. And I can tell you, some countries, some governments that haven't, I mean, you saw what happened in Sri Lanka. a popular uprising because of government not taking citizens seriously when they say, look, bei ya maisha is impossible. And we hope our colleagues in government. Now, are we at the mercy of the West? We are not. We have been down this route before. In 2003, debt to GDP was 70%. But the NAC administration then, and all these senior leaders were in that government, balanced the budget. In 2004, they had a budget surplus. In 2000, and they were able to say to World Bank, no, pole, hatutaki pesa yako, we are going to do what is correct for us. Yeah, they were able to bring down interest rates, even though US interest rates were high. So it's about the choices that government makes. The real question is this regime, do they have the mettle to make tough economic decisions, not really trying to, but we'll get into it deeper. I just thought we need to yeah.
All right, it's time ticking up almost to 7 o'clock. We want to take a short break. When we circle back, we delve deeper on that as well. But before we do that, we'll also hack back into history and see what really happened in the month of August briefly. And also, just we have a soapbox there on the museum where we have different legislators who serve this country, some very comical as well. Don't go away.